I don't like to start the Christmas season too early because I think it brings out the aspects of Christmas I don't enjoy. The stress, the rush, the overconsumption, and commercialization. And I like to celebrate the holidays as they align with the season. Christmas really is the start of winter, and it's a season that needs it. The dark, cold months are made so much easier through the spirit of giving and gathering, time with friends and family, the music, sharing of food and gifts and joy, the sparkling lights and the delicious treats. So I try not to barrel through December in an anticipation of one day, but embrace a season that lasts through the 12 days of Christmas and carries me into the new year. So I thought I would share some Christmas movie recommendations, some Christmas TV episodes, and then also my Christmas TBR. So starting with Christmas movies, I think there are a handful of classics that everybody knows about, so I don't need to talk about those. I wanted to share some that I think are maybe a little bit underrated or forgotten. The first one is The House Without a Christmas Tree. This is a 1970s made-for-TV movie about a young girl living in Nebraska in the 1940s who has kind of a strained relationship with her father, who is still working on processing his grief over the loss of his wife. And major conflict in the movie is that he won't let his daughter Addie get a Christmas tree. This is a very low budget film. It's not one that people really expected to go anywhere, but it ended up being really popular. It aired annually on CBS, and it actually went on to win an Emmy. It was rather critically acclaimed, but I think it's still pretty forgotten and lost to time, which is too bad because it's really wonderful. The screenplay was written by Eleanor Perry, who was a screenwriter and had a very interesting career and also very vocal feminist in Hollywood in this era. And I think the script is just really well done. It's very thoughtful and understated, and this is really the kind of movie that could be so schmaltzy and corny and overwrought, but it's really very grounded and very honest, and I think the characters are very real, the world is very real. I mean, her little town is so charming. I love like her little corner store and little schoolhouse, but it's still really grounded in human experience and emotion, and I think manages being one of those like wonderful, festive, heartwarming rewatches that is also very tuned into why life can be so hard. Christmas Eve on Sesame Street is another 1970s made-for-TV movie. Sesame Street, obviously a very iconic show. Still, I think, a bit underrated for its impact on not just children's television, but television at large, and its approach to diversity and multiculturalism, and television being a vehicle for expanding your world and opening your mind to new things and different kinds of people. Obviously, it's for children, but it's still very funny. There's a whole segment where Grover interviews kids about how they think Santa Claus gets down the chimney, and it's so delightful. This whole thing in general is just so lovely and sweet. There's beautiful music, there's references to other classic Christmas stories like The Gift of the Magi, has all the classic characters like Oscar the Grouch and Big Bird and Bert and Ernie, and is just a wonderful celebration of light and joy, and really captures why community is so special and essential to this time of year, and what a gift community can be, which I think is something that show achieved over and over again. So now for some feature films. Remember the Night is a 1940s rom-com starring Barbara Stanwyck as a shoplifter and Fred MacMurray as a district attorney who brings Barbara home for Christmas while she awaits trial for stealing jewelry. This is just one of my favorite Barbara Stanwyck performances. I love when she plays characters that have a bit of an edge and are a little bit seductive. The home that Fred MacMurray brings her back to is so charming. Like, the little small town is such a classic, like, Christmas romanticization of small town rural life. There's a barn dance, but it also has a bit of an edge that's very similar to the kind of Hallmark movies that get made today. Like, it follows a lot of the same beats. It's a cynical big city girl is kind of transformed by small town quaint life, but it's a lot smarter and sharper and funnier than I think those movies are made today. It also has two of the biggest stars of their generation. I do want to note it does have a racist depiction of the character Rufus, who works for Fred MacMurray, so it is by no means a flawless film. Christmas in Connecticut is another Barbara Stanwyck rom-com. This one is a bit more of a farce. It's a lot sillier. Barbara Stanwyck plays a food writer who publishes very popular articles about her rural life as a housewife, and she has to host a dinner for a returning soldier, so she's kind of forced to keep up this charade and pretend that she is this perfect housewife, which she's not. She's just a single big city girl. It has a lot of the like classic romantic comedy tropes like mistaken identity and fake dating and love at first sight, but again, just a little bit edgier and funnier. I think honestly Barbara Stanwyck just makes this whole thing work. She has such a coolness and charisma that kind of elevates the very ridiculous plot. It also just has some of my favorite things in movies
especially Christmas movies like snow in black and white movies, and those like 20-foot tall Christmas trees that they decorate with the shiny tinsel, and has just lovely, again, charming vignettes of quaint rural life. My dream 1940s farmhouse. They also have a dance, a sleigh ride in the snow. Just the kind of romanticization of small town life that I want injected directly into my veins this time of year. The Apartment is not technically a Christmas movie, and it is definitely a bit darker. It's still very funny, but it's quite cynical. It takes place in the week between Christmas and New Year's. Jack Lemmon plays an insurance guy who is renting out his apartment to his superiors so they can have affairs in them, and he hopes he will climb the corporate ladder. And he's also falling in love with the elevator girl, played by Shirley MacLaine. Definitely my favorite Shirley MacLaine performance. She's so vulnerable and compelling in this movie. It's one of the first movies, I think, to really contend with the impact of corporate life and the massive upheaval that the 9-to-5 caused, and how much it changed how we interact with each other and connect with each other and live our daily lives, and the kind of isolation and emptiness that it created. Just a really interesting early consideration of capitalism and like the soulless corporate grind. So not quite as festive or romanticized as the other movies I talked about, but I think that can sometimes be nice this time of year, especially if you're feeling a little bit of the holiday blues and you don't want so much festivity shoved down your throat. This is a really thought-provoking and moving story, and still has that kind of emotional release and sense of hope that I want this time of year. So my 3 favorite TV Christmas specials. The first one is the episode titled The Hard Luck Kid from The Mary Tyler Moore Show. One of my favorite sitcoms of all time. I think Mary Tyler Moore is a comedic genius, and this show was revelatory in a lot of ways and kind of changed the game again for what TV could be. And it's still very funny and cool and fresh. Not all of the jokes still land. It's not 100% timeless, but it's something I still get so much out of. In this episode, basically Mary has to work on Christmas Eve at the news station, and there's a lovely scene of Mary and Rhoda decorating Mary's Christmas tree. Mary and Rhoda are like one of the best duos, I think, from TV, and it's just cozy, it's warm, it's funny, and just one of my favorite rewatchables. There's a Bob Newhart Show episode. I think it's called Bob Has to Get His Tonsils Out, so he spends Christmas Eve in the hospital, which is also the plot summary of the episode. Bob Newhart, one of my favorite characters from TV. Kind of similar to Charlie Brown and A Charlie Brown Christmas in tone. I mean, Bob Newhart isn't quite as depressed as Charlie Brown, but he is kind of mellow, definitely an understated, very dry character. I think one of the things this show does really well is finding a really interesting balance between being very wacky and eccentric and kind of zany, but also very dry. Really works for me. Again, something to watch when you're maybe not feeling the most festive. It is more about kind of the Christmas blues, so something to watch when you're feeling maybe a little bit like left out of the holiday spirit, but also just very, very funny. One of the greatest episodes, I think, of the show overall. The last one is an episode of The Honeymooners called 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Not my favorite sitcom, I must say. I don't think it ages very well. I find Jackie Gleason's character very grating and hard to watch and just not particularly funny, but I think this episode remains a standout. It's much subtler and softer. It's kind of a spin on The Gift of the Magi, again, classic Christmas tale. They also break the fourth wall at the end of the episode and wish the audience a Merry Christmas, which I just really love. I think it's rare to see those like behind the scene moments in an era of television that was very staged and performative. So there's just a real charm to this and a real kind of understated, again, celebration of like the simple things at Christmas time and personal human connection. It's black and white. It's like a true kind of oldies vintage Christmas television feel. For my Christmas TBR, I have 3 books that I want to read because they are the source text for Christmas things I love. One is The Greatest Gift of All, which is the inspiration for the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I also want to read the book Miracle on 34th Street because I loved that movie as a kid. And I also want to read The Nutcracker because I've seen the ballet and I like listening to the music and just kind of those aesthetics this time of year, so I'm curious about the book. Also on my list is the Penguin Book of Christmas Stories, which is an anthology of various Christmas tales from around the world. I'm really excited about this. It's an opportunity to read some of those classic authors I haven't. I also think this time of year is perfect for like little tales and stories. I'm also really excited about the diverse origins and settings of these stories, and I don't read enough stories outside of American Hollywood nonsense. Holiday by Gaslight is a historical romance set in the Victorian era. The Victorian era and Christmas are like the perfect duo for me personally. And I also don't read historical romances enough, and every time I read them, I'm like, oh my god, this is so ridiculous. Give me another. Sounds like a classic historical romance. Dashing young lady needs to marry rich. Across Country Christmas is a contemporary romance where main character is forced to road trip back home for Christmas with her childhood crush. One can only assume sparks fly. She has a fear of flying, as do I, so it's nice to be represented and feel seen. And I also just love a road trip, partly because I hate flying, but also I love a road trip movie, I love a road trip story, I love a road trip setting. There's just something about it that there's just a certain special quality that you get when you're on the road. I already filmed this once and didn't turn my microphone on, and I'm really... Whew. Last one is Last Christmas in Paris, which is another historical fiction romance. It takes place between 1914 and 1918, so it's a World War II era romance. Just a compelling era that I like to read about. If you watched my Molly McIntyre video, you'll know that I am really fascinated by World War II history. So I'm excited to get into this one. Well reviewed on Goodreads, which is sometimes promising. I do plan to listen to most of these on audiobook because I don't really have a ton of time to sit down and read, but I do have time with my ears. So that's what I'll be reading and watching this holiday season. Definitely let me know your recommendations. I love reading them, and I also don't have any of my own book recommendations, so I'm definitely in need of those. But also Christmas movies. There might be some deep cuts I don't know about. Imagine that. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.